Hello Internet, and welcome to my live reaction for Eden Zero, chapter 160. When we last left our heroes, Shiki saw Shora standing over what looked like Witch's corpse. We learned that Witch is still alive, but kind of blind and can't move. Witch does tell Rebecca that before Rebecca can kind of escape with Witch, she has to find All Link and destroy it. She goes to do that. Shiki stays behind to focus on fighting Shora. I don't think he's going to win because he's completely blinded by rage, and we've had multiple scenes about the dangers of being blinded by rage. But we leave that plot behind to get the climax of Laguna versus Ijuna, as Laguna kind of gets at what I've been saying for a while, that Ijuna, without realizing it, used her string ether gear to bind herself to Shora, thereby falling in love with him. And so Laguna leads... Either Ijuna cries by the whole, tears of the heart thing, or Laguna damages her enough that she cries. Laguna turns her to water, and that snaps the string, just like it did to Shiki and Rebecca, freeing Ijuna, and she's now back with Oasis. And then meanwhile, back with Homura and Creed, Creed reveals his real name. I think it's Seiji Hojo, I think. And that he's from the homeworld of Homura. And specifically, Homura realizes that he's from the Shogun's family. And that's kind of where we left off last time. So let's dive right on into chapter 160, Scattering in the Starry Aoi Sea. And our picture here is of a present-day Homura, but back on Oedo. We see the kind of Japanese-style buildings in the background, with a little bit of, some of that looks a little bit sci-fi-y. You know, it tracks with the fact that it's kind of a sci-fi ancient Japan. But yeah, it's a nice picture. Scattering in the Starry Aoi Sea. And we open right where we left off, with Creed sort of revealing his identity to Homura. My name is Seiji Hojo. I come from the planet Oedo, just like you. And Homura, breaks into a sweat. You are from the Shogunate family? And she bows, instantly humbled. My liege! And Seiji and/or Creed, I'll decide what name to call him later, kind of shocked. And Homura goes on, In my ignorance of your lineage, I have been repeatedly and terribly rude to you. I humbly beg your forgiveness. And Creed kind of goes on, whoa, hold on, Miss Homura. Please, lift your head. And Homura does not relent. I mustn't. It is sheer insolence for the people of Oedo to look upon the countenance of any of the Shogunate family. But Creed counters, but we're not on Oedo. And that kind of stops Homura. When I left our planet, I learned just how outdated and pointless Oedo's class system really is. You learned it too, didn't you? The cosmoses are free. And finally, Homura kind of lifts her head. And so here's an interesting thing, though, is that we don't really... Going back to the Valkyrie flashback, we get the briefest of looks at Oedo's class system. The bit where, the town official's son tries to, claim ownership of Valkyrie, and when Homura doesn't, and she kind of fights back at him, he tries to, use his position to sort of, put pressure on Homura. But beyond that, we haven't really seen... we haven't gotten to see Homura learning how outdated Oedo's class system is, because I guess that must have happened before she joined up with the crew. I don't know, it's kind of a random bit of world-building detail. Anyway, Creed goes on, I would sincerely appreciate it if you would treat me the same way you always have. And Homura says still face down again, I do not believe I treated you in any way at all. And Creed sort of goes on, yeah, now that you mention it, then why don't we take this opportunity to be friends? And Creed sort of lays out his hand, and Homura hesitantly accepts it. But, my Lord Seiji, listen, I want to take the things I've learned out here in space and teach them to everyone in Oedo. I want to reform all our old customs in the class system and broaden Oedo's culture. That is a truly wonderful idea. And Homura kind of smiles at him, and Creed's heart beats, and he sort of blushes and turns away. Homura calls, what is the matter, Lord Seiji? So again, all of a sudden, it looks like Oedo might maybe be relevant. I kind of mentioned last time, is Oedo going to become like Wano? Where it's just sort of thing in the distance that we will eventually get to in 100 or 200 chapters, or if it's just gonna be a bit of shared backstory. And here, Creed is sort of implying that at some point he plans to return to Oedo and reform it. But I don't know. We'll kind of have to wait and see. What's the matter, Lord Seiji? And we see Seiji, I guess, kind of panicked. I've never seen Miss Homura smile before. It's too beautiful for words. And then Creed sort of collects himself and turns back to Homura. I'm going to stop the All-Link system. Will you help me? But of course, my lord. And now with the knowledge of who Seiji is, she's completely changed tack. This is no longer some weird guy flirting with her. This is her superior, which is kind of a weird bit, though, because Seiji's all like, I'm going to reform the class system and get rid of the class system. And Homura agrees, but she's still, we see, beholden to it. Which also doesn't quite match the young Homura from the Valkyrie flashback. That could just be like a younger Homura, and then she got older and sort of acclimated with Oedo society a little more, and now it's taking her a bit longer than Creed might want for her to sort of shirk that. Either way, then someone barges into the room. Nobody move. And it's Jesse, who should be with the army now, right? Didn't he get picked up by Justice once Elsie kind of jettisoned him? Jesse? And then Creed sort of smiles. What a relief. I was worried when we got separated. Homura looks at him. He's with Lord Seiji? No. I have met him before. And Jesse just goes on. Creed, she's in league with Elsie. You have to get away from her. Of course, Creed knows all this. Homura puts the pieces together. Elsie, of course. Did I not see you on Elsie's ship? But when Seiji tries to stop Jesse, it's okay, Jesse. She's on our side. Put the gun down. And Jesse goes on, you can't let her fool you, Creed. She's with Elsie. And we see Jesse, despite the fact that Elsie's crew showed him that mercy at the start of Foresta, he's gone full-on Justice-style zealot, for like an anti-Elsie zealot. And anyone with Elsie deserves to die. And Creed just kind of looks at him, Jesse. And Homer sort of watches silently. And then we leave that behind as we come back to space with Victory and Justice. Victory telling Justice, it's no use. I can't get through to Creed or Jesse. And Justice tells him, powerful jammers must be in place. And Victory just thinks, I hope they're both okay. What do we do? Do we go find them? And Justice responds, perhaps. The battle has subsided considerably in this sector. And then he gets some kind of danger report. Is that... And we see some kind of Leviathan-looking thing. Yeah, another Imperial ship. The Sea Serpent? Oh, no. Victory then gives us a little bit of exposition. But I thought that was a temple weapon. Somehow, Shora got this weapon from the temple and has brought it here. And Eraser remarks, this is not good news. And we see another Oasis ship. I think it might be Ibaraki's ship. It has this Oasis flag. And Ibaraki's kind of fumes, if and so. And I forget her name, the human woman in Oasis. Let me see if I can find her name real fast. Furena, I think. Furena and Dylan, I think, is the pair. Right? Yeah. So Furena sort of gets on to Ibaraki. Ibaraki? Enough with that noise. And Russo, I bet he's annoyed that you and Dylan keep flirting with each other on the private chat. And Dylan kind of hems and haws, we're not flirting. And then the one bot member, whose name I can't always remember, is it Gomakichi? I'm looking at the list. Yeah, Gomakichi. Then responds, hey, it's all good. We might actually win here. We might actually beat the Empire. And Ibaraki goes on, if and so, then I'm raring to go. So bring it on, punks. And then Ibaraki gets that alert. And Lizarre comes running back. Everybody scatter! And Furena looks at him, Lizarre? And we see this explosion. Guys, get out of here, now! Ibaraki, what is that? Russo is just shocked. Light? Dylan has kind of like closed his eyes. It's so bright. And Gomakishi just stares. Grr. And the light swallows Lizarre. I know Lizarre was not much of a character, but I liked him. I liked his design. I thought he was cool, and I think he just died. Yeah, because the sea serpent just shoots this beam and takes out Lizarre, it looks like. It hits Lizarre, clearly. We see his ship exploding around him. Gah! Ah! Dylan screams, Lizarre! And Ibaraki tries to rally the troops. Dodge that light! And it looks like the rest of them all do, except for Lizarre. Russo is, like, spinning. Ah! And then Furena responds, What happened? The beam didn't hit me, but my ship is dissolving. That's not good. Did we spend all this time, like, seeing, like, the same Oasis members over and over, giving them that characterization just to, like, kill them all like this? That's just mean, Mashima. That's just fucking mean. My ship is dissolving! And we see Furena's ship disappearing. Ibaraki calls, hurry! Get out of here! Full speed ahead! Dylan calls, Furena! And Furena then calls back, Dylan! And we see Furena herself is fading away. Like, her eyes disappeared. Her skin is, like, smoking. Dylan, I'm sorry, And Dylan calls back, Furena! And her ship explodes. Both Lizarre and Furena, I think, died there. Which, I sure as fuck wasn't expecting that. Ibaraki, Russo, Gomakichi all, like, hold back tears. Dylan cannot hold back his tears. He just screams, ah! And the sea serpent just stands there. Or just floats there in space. Kind of looking at the aftermath of its attack. Some, like, bridge member back on the main Coon remarks to Goodwin, we lost Lizarre and Furena. And Goodwin just sort of scrunches up his face, holds back his tears. And then we see the IUA guys headed towards the sea serpent. Justice, we're going to stop that sea serpent. Victory agrees, yeah. Eraser also chimes in, roger that. And then we come back to the basement, where Jesse is still pointing the gun at Seiji and Homura. Seiji tells him, put the gun down, Jesse. And Jesse just keeps going on, no, Creed, you get away from that woman. And Seiji just pushes up his glasses. Good grief. Ether lock. And he activates his ether gear, but Jesse just fires. Don't move! And he shoots Seiji right through the heart. This is not a good chapter to be like a B-list Eden Zero character. Because they're all just dying. We got Lizarre dead, Furena dead, maybe Seiji dead? And, like, just after we learned about his dreams of reforming Oedo, that's just kind of mean. And Jesse's kind of shocked that he fired that bullet. Creed freezes. Homura, mouth over her hands over her mouth in shock. And he doesn't die instantly. He's still alive. Kind of falls to his knees. Homura runs up to him. Lord Seiji! And Jesse's sort of in a panic, shocked that he actually pulled that trigger. And we see, Seiji his knees hit the ground. Jesse's still panicking. It's not my fault. I did it. It was Creed. And Homer runs up to him. Lord Seiji, stay with us. And Seiji's trying to hold on, but he's not doing well. Miss Homura, the moment I first saw you, you were so beautiful, and you reminded me of home. You stole my heart. He's, like, struggling to get these words out. Homer can only just sort of stare. I wish I could have walked the streets of Oedo with... And he falls dead. I was not expecting that. Like, I've complained a lot about Eden Zero, what Eden Zero seems to think being dark is. The kind of sexual violence, Iliga and Kurenai and all of that shit. And there's such a thing as too much death. But what we see here works. It's like Lizarre and Furena and Seiji aren't important enough characters that their deaths radically alter the plot, especially not Lizarre and Furena, who have always kind of been part of the pack of, like, the Oasis sort of top members. But having those named characters, those repeated named characters that we spent time with, die on us, it gives us this sense of, like, not quite no one is safe, but that, like, bad things can and do happen to people we care about. And I was not expecting any of this chapter. I'm gonna put that out there. No, I was not expecting Lizarre. I was not expecting Furena. I certainly was not expecting Seiji. Though perhaps with all of the with all of, like, the backstory, such as it was, that Seiji got at the start of this chapter, maybe I should have expected it, but I didn't. And Homura just stares at Seiji's lifeless eyes. Jesse's in a complete panic now. He's dead? And Homura just sort of closes her eyes and looks away. And we come back to that same concept of people dealing with sudden death. Dylan is, like, in a full-on existential crisis. Furena, no, it's not true. It can't be true. You can't. And we see Russo is the one crying the most for Lizarre. Lizarre. And, you know, like it's a similar kind of setup. We have Homura with Seiji, Dylan and Furena, Russo and Lizarre. Those all aren't quite the same relationships between each of those pairs, but, like, especially with Dylan, Furena, and Lizarre and Russo, those were the pairings for those characters we saw the most. And so it makes sense that those are the ones that mourn them the deepest. We see Ibaraki just kind of sitting there silently, and then finally screams out through his tears, "You piece of garbage! You're not supposed to die!" And then we come back to the Shiki Shora fight, as they're still just kind of trading blows. And Shiki kind of tells Shora, going back to the start of this fight, there were all those lights out in space. And Shiki readies his next attack. Every time one of them went off, a life went out. And he knocks Shora to the ground. Those lights won't go away. Not as long as you're around. So Shiki sees, like, that's a nice kind of tie-in. You know, it's been a while since we've seen Shiki, since that scene of Shiki looking out at the lights on the battlefield, acknowledging the death around him. But we have this moment of these named character deaths. Like, Shora and his plan for the All-Link is what is making that battle happen. And so, whether it's quite accurate or not, stopping Shora, in Shiki's mind, will stop the fighting. We'll see if that's, like, the fight is so complicated at this point that it might not actually work. But to Shiki, that'll work. So yeah, that's chapter 160. And it's maybe one of the heaviest, at least present day chapters in the series. It's just, you know, constant tragedy. Perhaps it could, like, all of these deaths are perhaps foreseeable, just in, like, knowing narrative tropes. You know, we start to get Seiji backstory, and then he dies. And to be fair, we've gotten enough backstory that, like, seeing Seiji tell us a little bit about his past is not an instant red flag, but in retrospect, it's one of those, like, retrospective red flags. Now that we know that he dies, him talking about, oh yeah, here's my life story, here's my dream for the future, is kind of a sign that he's about to die. And he does die. You know, excluding perhaps Rebecca using Cat Leaper, which was what happened the last time a main character died. But, like, the thing is, the last time a main character died, it was Shiki. And neither Seiji, nor Lizarre, nor Furena are important enough for it to be like, oh, Cat Leaper is definitely going to happen here. It still could. It still is a way that Mashima could kind of rewrite this. But it's not a sure thing like Shiki's death was. Though we'll see how the Shora Shiki fight turns out. I'm still not confident Shiki's going to win. Given the, like, focus on the dangers of rage earlier in the arc and how Shiki is just a giant ball of rage right now. But then yeah, going back to that retrospective red flags, this bit where Oasis is all like, we might actually win here. This is going really well. Right before Lizarre shows up trying to save everybody, and he mostly succeeds. He doesn't quite save himself or Furena, but, like, that's another red flag. The fact that they're all like, oh, we're going to win this thing, and then instantly afterwards, Lizarre shows up. In retrospect, it's kind of obvious something bad's about to happen. Yeah, the only other thing to really talk about is kind of Jesse's role in all this. Because there's this sort of mix of, some characters are able to just forge alliances in the moment, right? We saw back on Nero 1, Decker needs Jaguar, and so the two of them, or Decker was, or Rickard, whatever his name was, the CEO needs Jaguar, and so they're in an alliance to fight Nero. Oasis and the IUA aren't really ever in conflict with each other, but they're not really allies either, but because they're both trying to take down Shora and stop the All-Link, they're coming together. But for some characters, like Homura earlier when she was mistrusting of Seiji before learning who he was, and tragically Jesse here, those conflicts are not breachable. I've talked about like what will happen when Justice learns who he's kind of fighting with on the surface. That he's allied with Oasis, who's allied with the allies of Elsie. And I think Jesse's actions here are kind of a mini version of what might happen. Because if it were Elsie, there is no, if it were Elsie instead of the crew of Edens, there's no way Justice would ever ally with her. The crew of Edens are just kind of separate enough that there is a chance, given everything else going on, Justice might willingly ally with them. But Jesse is not so much. He sort of bought into all of Justice's hatred for Elsie, even though Elsie's crew chose not to kill him when they had the chance. And when they might have even been right to kill him, they chose to let him live. And that, even despite that, he's bought into this anti-Elsie zealotry that Justice sort of spews. And that ends tragically, with Justice putting a bullet in Creed for daring to help out someone who was allied with Elsie. And yeah, Creed dies. Furena dies. Lizarre dies. Shit's fucked. Shit's fucked. And it looks like we're going back to the Shora-Shiki fight. Again, I don't think Shiki's going to win in the end, despite that good hit at the end of the chapter. But God, I was not expecting a chapter like this. It completely blindsided me. Especially when Creed died. Lizarre and Furena were minor enough that, I didn't want them to die, but, it's not so far out of left field. Creed is, a major player. Or, not a major player, but, one step below the major players. And I don't know what's going to happen to Justice now that one of his, top lieutenants is dead. There's no way Jesse's going to have any home. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I don't know. Lots of good shit here. Lots of sad shit. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what all comes of this later. Yeah, so I'm going to leave this video up here. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter and the video itself. If you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe. Do whatever makes you happy, And remember, your life is your own, okay? Bye!